The day my husband graduated from medical school, I stood in the front row, holding a bouquet of white lilies and wearing the same blue dress I'd bought 5 years earlier. Not because it was my favorite, because after working 3 jobs, paying his tuition, covering our rent, and skipping every luxury, it was still the nicest dress I owned. As the dean handed him his diploma, I cried harder than anyone else in that auditorium. I thought they were tears of pride. I had no idea. They were the last happy tears I'd ever cry as his wife. My name is Vivienne Hale. 5 years earlier, I wasn't married to a doctor. I was married to a dream. His name was Dr. Adrian Holloway. Well, he wasn't a doctor yet. He was just Adrian, the man who used to study anatomy books under the flickering light of our tiny apartment kitchen. The man who promised me, when I become a doctor, every sacrifice you make for me, I'll spend the rest of my life repaying. I believed every word, because that's what love does. It makes promises sound like guarantees. People often ask, how did you afford medical school? The answer is simple. We didn't. I did. During those 5 years, I woke up every morning at 4:30, worked the breakfast shift at a downtown cafe. By 11, I changed uniforms and spent the afternoon working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. 3 evenings a week, I cleaned office buildings until almost midnight. When I finally came home, my feet hurt so badly, I'd soak them in ice water just to sleep. Adrian would usually be awake, surrounded by textbooks. I'd kiss his forehead, heat up leftover pasta, and ask the same question every single night. How was studying? He'd smile. One step closer, and somehow, that made everything worth it. People thought I was crazy. My older sister, Celeste, certainly did. She looked at me one afternoon while I counted dollar bills to pay Adrian's tuition. She shook her head. Vivienne, you're building a castle on someone else's land. I laughed. What does that even mean? It means you're investing everything in someone who'll eventually outgrow you. I rolled my eyes. Adrian isn't like that. She didn't argue. She simply looked at me with the kind of sadness that only comes from someone who's already seen the ending. Our apartment was barely 600 square feet. The kitchen sink leaked. The heater only worked if you kicked it twice. When it rained, we placed a bucket under the living room ceiling. But every Sunday, we ate pancakes sitting on the floor because we couldn't afford a dining table. Adrian would hold my hand and say, one day, I'm going to buy you the biggest house with the brightest kitchen and a breakfast table where you'll never have to sit on the floor again. I smiled every time, not because I cared about the house, because I believed I'd be sitting across from him. One winter, I quietly sold my grandmother's engagement ring. It was the only thing she'd left me. The jeweler asked, "Are you sure?" I lied. Yes, the money covered Adrian's final semester tuition. That night, I never told him. Some sacrifices don't need applause. As graduation grew closer, our life finally started feeling lighter. Adrian had interviews at some of the best hospitals in the state. Everyone congratulated him. No one congratulated the woman who had quietly made it possible. I didn't mind. His success felt like mine too. At least, that's what I believed. Graduation morning arrived. The campus buzzed with families. Parents carried flowers. Children ran across the lawn. Cameras flashed everywhere. I stood alone, holding my bouquet, searching for Adrian. When I finally spotted him, he looked different. Not physically. Something else. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I walked over and hugged him. We did it. He hugged me back, for barely a second, then gently stepped away. I need to talk to one of my professors. Before I could answer, he disappeared into the crowd. The ceremony ended. Hundreds of graduates threw their caps into the air. I screamed louder than anyone. "That's my husband!" People around me clapped. An elderly woman smiled. "You must be so proud." "I am. I really am." She had no idea how much those words cost me. An hour later, Adrian asked if we could stop at our apartment before going to dinner. "I have something for you." My heart raced. I thought maybe he'd bought me a necklace or planned a surprise. Maybe, after 5 years, this was finally our moment. I couldn't have been more wrong. As soon as we walked inside, he closed the front door. The apartment felt strangely quiet. He didn't smile. He didn't sit down. Instead, he reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a large manila envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter. I looked at it, then at him. "What's this?" He took a deep breath. The next sentence destroyed everything. I thought I knew about my marriage. I looked at the envelope, then back at Adrian. "What's this?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the living room window, his back still facing me. Finally, he quietly said, "I think it's time we stopped pretending." My chest tightened. "Pretending?" He nodded. "This marriage has been over for a long time." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain refused to believe what my ears had just heard. "What are you talking about? We're celebrating today. You just graduated. We're supposed to go to dinner." He slowly turned around. "There isn't going to be a dinner." He gently pushed the envelope toward me. My fingers felt numb. I opened it. The first page read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers." I stared at the words, waiting for them to change. They didn't. I looked up. "This is a joke. It's a joke." "It isn't. You filed these?" Last week, while I was ordering flowers for his graduation. While I was telling everyone how proud I was of my husband, he had already decided I wasn't going to be his wife anymore. My voice barely came out. "Why?" There was a long silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You don't fit the life I'm about to have." I blinked. "What?" He sighed. "You deserve honesty. I'm going to be working with surgeons, specialists, hospital boards, charity galas." He looked around our tiny apartment. "I've outgrown this life." Then he looked directly at me. "And I've outgrown us." I felt as if someone had reached inside my chest and stolen the air. "I worked 3 jobs for us." "I know. I sold my grandmother's ring for your tuition." "I know. I believed in you when no one else did." "I know." Every answer was exactly the same. "I know." As if acknowledging my sacrifices somehow erased them. Then came the sentence that hurt even more. "You'll be okay. You've always been strong." Strong. People always call you strong right before. They expect you to survive something that should have broken you. I looked around the apartment. The leaking sink, the cracked coffee mug, the old couch we found on the curb. Every single thing in that room had a memory attached to it. Every memory had both of us in it. Apparently, I was the only one who still remembered. I whispered, "Is there someone else?" He hesitated. For just a second, that was enough. "There is." The room became silent. "I didn't plan this," he quickly added. "It just happened." "When?" He looked away. "During my residency interviews. So while I was working nights, you were falling in love?" His silence answered for him. "Who is she?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Her name is Dr. Elise Thornton. She's a cardiology fellow." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because suddenly everything made sense. She wasn't just another woman. She was a doctor. Someone who already belonged to the world he wanted to enter. I quietly placed the papers back on the table. "So, after everything, I'm just temporary?" He closed his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. No, you just wanted the life I paid for. For the first time." He looked ashamed. But shamed doesn't undo betrayal. I picked up my bouquet. The white lilies I'd carried all morning. Then I walked toward the kitchen trash can and gently dropped them inside. Petal by petal, they disappeared. Just like the future I'd spent 5 years building. As I reached the front door, Adrian spoke again. "Vivienne." I didn't turn around. "I really hope one day you'll understand." I finally looked back. "No, you don't," he frowned. "You think today is the day you became a doctor." I slowly opened the door. "But today's actually the day you stopped being the man I fell in love with." Then I walked out, without slamming the door, because some endings don't need noise. Silence can be much louder. Outside, my phone started ringing. It was my sister, Celeste. The moment I answered, she didn't say hello. She simply asked, "Did he do it?" I froze. My voice shook. How did you know? There was a long pause. Then she quietly replied, "Because I've been trying to tell you something for almost a year." I pulled my car into an empty parking lot. For almost 5 minutes, I couldn't drive. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even think. The divorce papers were still lying on the passenger seat. Every time I looked at them, they felt less like paper and more like proof that 5 years of my life had been erased. My phone was still connected. Celeste hadn't hung up. She quietly asked, "Are you alone?" I nodded, before realizing she couldn't see me. "Yes." She took a deep breath. "Then listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt." I laughed bitterly. "I don't think anything can hurt more than today. I was wrong. Do you remember the hospital fundraiser last summer?" I frowned. "The one you couldn't attend?" "Yeah, I worked overtime that night, so Adrian went alone." Celeste sighed. "He wasn't alone." I gripped the steering wheel. "What do you mean? I was catering that event. I saw him with Dr. Elise Thornton." My heart skipped. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. I immediately defended him. Maybe they were just coworkers. I thought that too, so I didn't say anything. But then I saw them again. 3 weeks later, having dinner. Just the two of them. I closed my eyes. "No," Celeste continued. "After that, I started paying attention. There were conferences that didn't exist, late-night study sessions that ended at expensive restaurants. I wanted proof before I destroyed your marriage. I whispered, so you stayed quiet. I stayed careful." A long silence filled the car. Then Celeste quietly added, "Vivienne, I don't think he fell in love." I frowned. "What?" "I think he started planning his exit long before today." Those words echoed inside my head. Planning. Not drifting apart. Not growing distant. Planning. That night, I didn't go back to the apartment. I checked into the cheapest motel I could find. Room 108. The carpet smelled like old cigarettes. The air conditioner rattled all night. The mattress sagged in the middle. It wasn't home. But neither was the apartment anymore. Around midnight, I opened my banking app. For years, Adrian had handled our savings. I trusted him completely. There had never been a reason not to. I logged into our joint account. Balance, $312.47. I stared at the screen. Confused. That couldn't be right. Just 2 weeks earlier, our savings account had almost $80,000. Money we'd built, one paycheck at a time. My breathing quickened. I refreshed the page. Same number. Then I opened the transaction history. One transfer. 3 days earlier, $79,850. Transferred to a new personal account. Authorized by Adrian Holloway. For several seconds, I simply stared. The divorce papers weren't the first betrayal. He had already emptied our future. My hands shook as I called the bank. After verifying my identity, the representative quietly explained, because it was a joint account, either account holder was legally allowed to transfer the funds. Legally. What a strange word. Something can be legal and still break your heart. I looked around the tiny motel room. One suitcase, one handbag, 3 work uniforms. That was all I had left. 5 years, reduced to luggage. The next morning, I went back to the apartment. Not to beg, not to argue, just to collect my things. When I unlocked the door, voices drifted from inside. A woman's laughter. Soft, comfortable, familiar. My heart began pounding. Slowly, I stepped inside. The first thing I saw was my coffee mug. The one that read, "World's Luckiest Wife." Someone else was drinking from it. I lifted my eyes. Standing in my kitchen, wearing one of Adrian's shirts, was Dr. Elise Thornton. She looked at me, then at Adrian. The smile vanished from her face. No one said a word. For a moment, all 3 of us stood frozen. Then Elise quietly whispered, "I didn't know she'd be home." I stood frozen in the doorway. Dr. Elise Thornton was standing in my kitchen, wearing one of Adrian's shirts, holding my coffee mug. For a moment, it felt like I was the guest, inside my own home. No one spoke. Then Adrian finally broke the silence. Vivienne, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. There are certain sentences that only guilty people say. I slowly placed my suitcase beside the door, then looked directly at Elise. How long? She frowned. What? How long have you been with my husband? She looked confused, then slowly answered. Almost 8. 8 months. 8 months. 8 months while I worked double shifts. 8 months while I packed his lunches. 8 months while I believed our future was finally beginning. I looked at Adrian. You started dating her while I was paying your tuition loan? He lowered his head. I never wanted it to happen like this. I ignored him. Instead, I kept looking at Elise. Did he tell you he was married? She hesitated, then quietly said, he told me you'd already separated. The room became completely silent. I slowly turned toward Adrian. You told her I had already left? He couldn't meet my eyes? Elise's expression changed. She looked from Adrian to me, then back again. You said the divorce was finalized. Adrian stayed silent. You told me she moved out months ago. Still, nothing. For the first time, I saw confusion replace confidence on Elise's face. She looked at me and softly asked, You've been living here? Living here? I nodded. Until yesterday, Elise took one step backward. No, she whispered. No, this can't be right. She looked at Adrian. Tell me, she's lying. He didn't answer. Sometimes, silence is the loudest confession. Elise slowly placed the coffee mug onto the counter. Her hands were shaking. You told me you were alone. You said your marriage ended because you grew apart. She swallowed hard. You never said she was still working 3 jobs to support you. Adrian finally spoke. I was trying to protect everyone. Elise stared at him in disbelief. Protect? You made me the other woman without even giving me the choice. I hadn't expected that. Neither had Adrian. For several seconds, the apartment was completely silent. Then Elise reached into her purse, pulled out a small velvet box. She placed it on the kitchen counter. I was going to tell you tonight. Adrian looked confused. What? She slowly opened the box. Inside was an engagement ring. I was going to say yes. She looked at him with tears forming in her eyes. But now, I don't even know who you are. Without another word, she removed the necklace he had given her, placed it beside the ring, then quietly walked toward the door. As she passed me, she stopped. I'm sorry. I truly didn't know. I looked into her eyes. For the first time, I believed her. You don't owe me. The apology. The apartment door closed behind her, leaving only me and Adrian. The silence felt unbearable. He took one step toward me. Vivienne, I can explain. I shook my head. No, you can explain to yourself. I picked up my suitcase, then looked around our apartment one final time. The leaking sink, the bucket under the ceiling, the tiny kitchen, the floor where we'd eaten pancakes. Every dream we built together was still there. Only one thing was missing: the man who had once shared it with me. As I reached the front door, Adrian quietly said, "Where will you go?" I answered, without turning around. The same place I've always gone: work. The next 6 months became the hardest of my life. I rented a tiny studio apartment, worked mornings at the cafe, afternoons at the dental clinic, nights cleaning offices. Sometimes I slept less than 4 hours, but something had changed. For the first time in years, every dollar I earned belonged to me. Then, one rainy Tuesday, my manager called me into his office. "Vivienne, we have a visitor, a doctor." My heart skipped. I thought, Adrian had come back. I couldn't have been more wrong. Standing outside the office was Dr. Elise Thornton, holding a thick brown envelope. She looked at me and quietly said, "There's something you deserve to know." For a second, I simply stared at her. Dr. Elise Thornton, the woman I thought had destroyed my marriage, now standing outside my manager's office, holding a thick brown envelope. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, as if she'd spent months trying to decide whether to come here. My manager quietly smiled. "I'll give you two some privacy." As soon as he left, neither of us spoke. Finally, Elise held out the envelope. "I think this belongs to you," I frowned. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "Evidence." I didn't understand. Evidence of what? She looked directly into my eyes. "That your husband didn't just betray your marriage. He betrayed your future." My heartbeat quickened. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of bank statements, loan documents, property contracts, emails, dozens of pages. Every single one had Adrian's name on it. I looked up. "What am I looking at?" Elise pointed to one document. "Start here." It was a mortgage application. Date, 4 months before graduation. Applicant, Dr. Elise Thornton. Co-applicant, Dr. Elise Thornton. I stopped breathing. House price, $1.20 million. My eyes widened. "This can't be right," Elise nodded sadly. "I thought he'd saved the down payment. He told me his investments had done well." I flipped another page. Wire transfer records. $80,000, the exact amount that disappeared from our joint account, transferred into Adrian's personal account. Then, 3 days later, used as the down payment for the new house. The room started spinning. He hadn't taken our savings to start over. He had used my money to build his new life. I whispered. "He bought her a house with my savings." Elise quietly corrected me. "No, he bought himself a future. I was just supposed to live in it." For the first time, I realized she had lost something too. Not 5 years, not a marriage, but trust. She reached into the envelope again. "There's more." She handed me printed emails between Adrian and a law firm. One sentence caught my attention immediately. "Make sure the divorce is finalized before my employment contract begins." Date, 8 months earlier. 8 months. The exact same time their relationship started. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't someone who slowly fell out of love. This was planning. Every interview, every dinner, every smile, every promise. Planned. I slowly sat down, trying to understand how someone I loved could calculate my heartbreak months in advance. Then I noticed one final document. At the bottom was a name I didn't recognize. Holloway Medical Consulting, LLC. "What is this?" Elise looked uncomfortable. I asked him once. He told me it was for tax purposes, but after I left, I had a lawyer look into it. She leaned closer. "Vivienne, he didn't just move your money. He opened that company using your social security information before changing it to his own." I froze. "What?" "He used your credit history to qualify for business financing." My stomach dropped. That wasn't betrayal. That was fraud. For several seconds, I couldn't say a word. Then, without warning, I laughed. Elise looked confused. "Why are you laughing?" I shook my head. "Because for 6 months, I kept asking myself what I did wrong." I looked at the papers. "I finally know. I didn't marry the man I thought I did." Elise quietly nodded. "I don't think either of us did." She stood up. "I have one more thing." She handed me a business card. "My attorney, he's the one who found everything. He told me you should call him immediately." I looked at the card, then back at her. "Why are you helping me?" She smiled sadly. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago." She turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, she quietly said, "Oh, one more thing." I frowned. "What?" She took a deep breath. Adrian doesn't know. Oh, I copied those files. She walked away, leaving me alone, holding the envelope. Holding the first real proof that the worst day of my life was only the beginning. That night, I didn't cry. For the first time since graduation, I felt something different. Not hope, not happiness, clarity. The next morning, I called the attorney. His receptionist answered. Mr. Graham Whitmore's office. I introduced myself. There was a brief pause. Then she said something that made my heart race. Mrs. Hale, Mr. Whitmore has been expecting your call. The next morning, I barely slept. The brown envelope sat on my kitchen table, like it had been staring at me all night. Every time I looked at it, I found another reason to question the man I'd spent 5 years loving. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked into Graham Whitmore's law office. It was nothing like I'd imagined. No marble floors, no expensive artwork, just quiet walls filled with books, the kind of place where people came after their lives had fallen apart. A woman at the front desk smiled. Mrs. Hale? I nodded. Mr. Whitmore is ready for you. When I entered his office, he stood and shook my hand. Vivienne, I'm Graham. His voice was calm, not rushed, not overly sympathetic, just steady. For some reason, that made me feel safer. He motioned toward a chair. I've reviewed everything Dr. Thornton sent. I looked surprised. You already have? He nodded. Last night, I wanted to be prepared. For several moments, he quietly organized the papers. Then he looked at me. I'm going to ask you something. It may sound strange. I nodded. Were you ever trying to become wealthy? I frowned. No, I just wanted to build a life. He smiled sadly. Good, because people who only care about money usually make terrible witnesses. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. He opened a file. Vivienne, legally speaking, your divorce is actually the smallest problem in this room. I stared at him. What do you mean? He turned one document toward me. Identity misuse, unauthorized financial transfers, potential tax fraud, possible mortgage fraud. He paused. And depending on what we uncover, wire fraud. I swallowed hard. I never imagined Adrian could do something criminal. Graham quietly replied, neither do most spouses. He handed me a yellow legal pad. I want you to write down every financial sacrifice you made. I frowned. What difference does that make? He leaned back. Because judges don't just look at numbers. They look at patterns. For the next hour, I wrote everything. The cafe, the dental clinic, cleaning offices, selling my grandmother's ring, missing birthdays, working Christmas Eve, canceling vacations, skipping doctor appointments because I couldn't afford them. 5 years of sacrifices. 1 page became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 12. When I finally stopped writing, my hand hurt. Graham quietly looked through the pages. Then he removed his glasses. I've practiced law for 27 years. I've seen people lose businesses, millions of dollars, entire companies. He gently placed my notebook on his desk. But I've rarely seen someone invest this much into another person's future. I looked down. I thought, that's what marriage was, he nodded. It is, when both people are building together. Then he opened another folder. There is one thing I haven't told you yet. My stomach tightened. What? He slid a photograph across the desk. I picked it up. It showed Adrian standing beside the hospital's new chief executive officer, both of them smiling, hands shaking. At first, I didn't understand. Then I noticed the date. The picture had been taken almost 6 months before Adrian graduated. I frowned. Why does this matter? Graham looked at me carefully. Because, according to hospital records, Adrian had already signed his employment contract before he filed for divorce. I blinked. So his salary was guaranteed. The promotion was guaranteed. The new house was was already under contract. The divorce was simply the final step. It hit me like ice water. He hadn't left me because success changed him. Success had simply revealed who he'd been for a very long time. I whispered. So, none of this was impulsive. Graham slowly shook his head. No, this was carefully organized. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, not because I still loved Adrian, but because I finally understood that every promise he made during our last year together had been spoken, while he already knew he was leaving. Then Graham closed the folder. I have good news. I looked up. He smiled. For the first time, you have something he doesn't. What? The truth, I frowned. Is that enough? He looked directly into my eyes. It usually is. As I stood to leave, his phone rang. He answered, listened quietly. Then his expression changed. He slowly looked at me. Viviane, I think you're going to want to hear this. I felt my heartbeat rise. What happened? He lowered the phone. The hospital just launched an internal investigation into Dr. Adrian Holloway. When Graham ended the call, he remained unusually quiet. I had learned something about him. He never spoke, unless he was certain. Finally, he looked at me. The investigation didn't start because of us. I frowned. Then why? He slowly closed the folder. Because someone inside the hospital started asking questions. The hospital's compliance department noticed irregular financial disclosures on Adrian's employment paperwork. They requested additional documents. And some of those documents didn't match. I felt my stomach tighten. So, they already suspect him? Graham nodded. They just don't know how much. For the first time since graduation, I didn't feel fear. I felt something else. The truth was finally moving, without me pushing it. 3 days later, I received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID simply read, St. Gabriel Medical Center. I almost didn't answer. When I did, a calm voice spoke. Mrs. Hale? Yes. My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm with Human Resources. We'd like to meet with you. I frowned. I'm no longer connected to Dr. Holloway. I understand. This meeting isn't about your marriage. It's about your financial records. The next morning, I walked into the hospital for the first time since Adrian graduated. Everything looked different. Doctors hurried through the hallways. Patients filled the waiting rooms. Everyone seemed busy. No one recognized me. 5 years, helping someone reach this place, and I was just another visitor. Rebecca welcomed me into a private conference room. 2 other people were already there, a hospital attorney and a compliance investigator. The investigator smiled politely. We appreciate you coming. For nearly an hour, they asked simple questions. Did you authorize, this bank transfer? No. Were you aware? Your personal information was used to establish a business entity? No. Did you receive any proceeds from that company? No. Every answer was exactly the same. No. Then, the investigator slid one final document across the table. I looked down. It was a reimbursement request, signed with my name. Except, it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it. I quietly whispered, That's not mine. The investigator nodded. We know. We had it examined. Rebecca leaned forward. Mrs. Hale, we don't believe you were involved, but your statement confirms something important. What? Dr. Holloway lied during the hiring process. The room became silent. I never imagined I'd hear those words, not because I wanted revenge, because for months I'd questioned myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I'd failed. Maybe I deserved what happened. Now, strangers who had never met me were confirming that none of this had been my fault. As I stood to leave, Rebecca gently stopped me. One more thing. She handed me a sealed envelope. What's this? It's from our Employee Assistance Foundation. I looked confused. I don't work here. She smiled softly. No, but sometimes the people standing behind success are forgotten. Inside was a check. $20,000. Not compensation. Not charity. A hardship grant created for spouses who had financially supported medical students through extraordinary circumstances. I stared at the amount. "I can't accept this," Rebecca smiled. "You already earned it." For the first time since my marriage ended, I cried. Not because I was broken, because someone had finally seen the sacrifices no one ever noticed. As I walked outside, my phone vibrated. It was Adrian, his first call in almost 7 months. I stared at the screen. It stopped ringing. Then another call. Then another. Finally, a voicemail appeared. I almost deleted it. Instead, I pressed play. His voice sounded nothing like I remembered. Tired, shaken, almost frightened. "Vivienne, please. I need to talk to you. I made a mistake. No, I made hundreds. My attorney says you're working with Graham Whitmore. Please, don't let this go any further. I'll return every dollar. I'll do anything. Just call me back." I slowly locked my phone. 7 months earlier, I had begged for one honest conversation. Now, the man who wouldn't even give me a proper goodbye was begging for mine. I looked up at the bright afternoon sky, then quietly whispered to myself, "Some conversations arrive too late." I put my phone back into my purse and kept walking. For 3 days, I ignored Adrian's calls. Then 3 days became 3 weeks. Eventually, the calls stopped. So did the messages. For the first time, my phone was quiet. And strangely, so was my heart. 2 months later, the divorce was officially finalized. I walked out of the courthouse holding nothing. No wedding ring, no settlement papers, no expectations, just my own name, Vivienne Hale. Funny how something as simple as your own name can feel like a fresh beginning. A week later, Graham called. "Good news," I smiled. "I think I've earned some." He laughed softly. "I think you have. The court approved a full financial restitution. Every dollar taken from your joint account must be repaid. The fraudulent business account has been frozen. The mortgage is under investigation. And the medical board has suspended Adrian's license, pending the outcome." I closed my eyes. Not because I was celebrating, because I finally realized justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives one quiet decision at a time. A few days later, I received one final letter. Not from a lawyer, not from the court, from Adrian. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. "Vivienne, I've rewritten this letter at least 20 times. There isn't a version where I deserve your forgiveness. I confused ambition with success, and I confused loyalty with something that would always be there. By the time I understood what I'd lost, I had already destroyed it. You once told me that love isn't measured by promises. It's measured by what people do when life becomes difficult. You kept that promise. I didn't. I'm sorry. I don't expect an answer. I just hope, one day, when you remember my name, it doesn't hurt quite as much. Adrian." I folded the letter, placed it inside a drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I no longer needed to carry it. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. The owner of the dental clinic where I'd worked called me into her office. "Vivienne, I'm retiring." I smiled. "You've earned it." She nodded. "I have." Then she slid a folder across the desk. "I'd like to sell the practice." I looked confused. "To me?" She smiled. "I've watched you for 6 years. You know every patient. You know every employee. And more importantly, you know how to care about people." I laughed nervously. "I can't afford to buy a clinic." She smiled again. "I know. So I'm offering owner financing. Small monthly payments. The same chance someone once gave me." 3 months later, the sign outside changed. Hale Family Dental Care. Not because I was a dentist, because I finally owned something built with my own hard work. Not someone else's dream, my own. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was watering flowers outside the clinic when a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened. Adrian stepped out. He looked older. Not because of time, because regret has a way of aging people. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then he smiled, a small, tired smile. I heard, "This place was yours." "It is. I'm happy for you. Thank you." Silence. Then he quietly asked, "Can I say one last thing?" I nodded. He looked around at the clinic, then back at me. "I spent years thinking you were standing behind my success. I never realized you were capable of creating your own." I smiled politely. "Neither did I." He nodded. "I hope you have a beautiful life." I answered honestly. "I already do." He extended his hand. Not as a husband, not as a stranger, just as someone accepting the end. I shook it. Then he walked away. This time, I didn't watch him leave. I turned around and walked back inside, because my future was waiting for me, not my past. That evening, I closed the clinic, locked the front door, and noticed something written on the glass. The clinic's slogan. A patient had suggested it. It simply read, "Healing begins where honesty lives." I stood there, reading those words. Then I smiled, because they weren't just true for medicine. They were true for life. People often ask me if I regret paying for Adrian's medical school. The answer surprises them. No, I don't regret being generous. I don't regret believing in someone. I don't regret loving with my whole heart. The only thing I regret is forgetting to believe in myself at the same time. If you're listening and someone has made you feel like your sacrifices meant nothing, please remember this. Kindness is never weakness. Loyalty is never failure. The wrong people may take advantage of them, but the right life will reward them. Sometimes, not by giving you back what you lost, but by showing you what you were capable of becoming all along. Thank you for listening to my story. And if it taught you anything, I hope it's this. Never build your entire future around someone else's dream without protecting your own.